What's up, everybody? I'm Mckenty. This is my second channel, and this is your home for my Twitch highlights and my podcast. So if you like this and you want to see more of that and you want to join the live streams, there's a link to that in the description of this video. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Here's a question that has come up quite a few times that I wanted to address. Unfortunately, I think those of you who are fans of stoner rock and doom metal and all that kind of thing may not like this one, but you know the deal. I got to keep it real. I can't lie. Here's the question. As someone who's recently stumbled into stoner rock, what are your opinions on it? Well, in general, I try to kind of avoid covering things that I don't like because I don't want to be rude. And a lot of people may think that I take delight in quote unquote shitting on music that other people like. I don't at all. It's not true. But many people have asked me about this, and I've always just sort of avoided the question, but I will answer it. And to make a long story short, I don't think it's great. For anybody who is not familiar, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the genre, which, by the way, I'm no expert on it. I kind of know the basics, but, there's plenty of other people who know lots and lots more about this stuff than I do. But according to Wikipedia, stoner rock, also known as stoner metal or stoner doom, apparently not to be confused with regular old doom. I don't know what the difference between stoner doom and regular doom is, but apparently there is one. Is a rock music fusion genre that combines elements of doom metal with psychedelic rock and acid rock. The genre emerged during the early 1990s and was pioneered foremost by Caius and Sleep. That sounds about right to me, but if I had to point to one song that started the whole thing, it would be this song by Black Sabbath from whatever this is, like 1969 or something like that, Sweet Leaf. And in case you didn't know, by Sweet Leaf, don't tell mom, but Sweet Leaf means weed, marijuana. This song is about marijuana. Shh, don't tell mom, she's right outside. But this is the song that started it all, as far as I'm concerned. You like that choppy sample? Now, when I say that this is sort of the template for stoner rock, I'm not exaggerating. It's like, to me, the whole genre is basically, I don't want to say copying this song, but we'll just say heavily inspired by this song. Where I discovered it was a band called Sleep in the early 90s. This is the album that I first discovered, this song called The Druid, I remember. I think this is from like 92, 93. This was the first thing I heard. And you can see this sort of aesthetic, this sort of hippie-inspired acid aesthetic, which in metal, nobody was really doing back then. That was like pretty fresh. I didn't really like this because I wanted to hear like fast death metal and grind back then. But you can hear how this is sort of like an updated version of Black Sabbath, right? Similar sort of feel. The vocals on Sleep are a little bit more, I guess, harsh might be the word. So I heard this at the time and I was like, all right. I mean, again, this is just my personal opinion. People are asking me what I think. My opinion back then is I thought Black Sabbath was boring and slow because I wanted to hear like Sepultura, Deicide, Morbid Angel. That's what I wanted. Napalm Death. Black Sabbath was like dad rock to me back then. And respect to Black Sabbath, obviously pioneers, but I don't know. By the time I heard Black Sabbath, I had already gotten into like, hardcore and stuff. So it just always sounded kind of bland and boring to me. And I kind of felt the same about Sleep. Sleep was a little bit cooler, I guess. But I thought it was a little bit boring. And then this is from their next album, Dopesmoker, which is really kind of the template for this whole genre, in my opinion, even more so than Black Sabbath. Oh, this is not a Dopesmoker. Okay, well, whatever. In any case, you get the idea. Like, whereas Black Sabbath was kind of trying to be, I guess, a little bit veiled with the references, Sweet Leaf, don't tell mom. Sleep just called this Dopesmoker, right? They're not trying to hide it anymore. It's the 90s. We don't have to hide it. We can smoke dope. And you kind of get the vibe from this album. They're really kind of referencing that like late 60s, early 70s sort of vibe, with these, whatever these people are, these Jawas trudging through the space desert with their space camel and the sort of 70s inspired sort of logo. It kind of reminded me of the covers of like Heavy Metal magazine. If If you guys remember that, if you guys are old, reminds you of this kind of look, right? I would read heavy metal whenever I could find it because sometimes there were boobies in the drawings. You know, the adult illustrated fantasy magazine, meaning it would have some story about like this guy trudging across a desert and he would meet some sexy aliens with 3 boobies. You know, this sort of look, right? November 1977. You can see how this aesthetic and these illustrations has been so like influential on like, you know, stoner metal and that sort of stoner rock, that sort of thing. So Sleep to me was kind of, at least as far as I can tell, was sort of the real defining band of what I would think of as like stoner rock. Until then, I mean, maybe there were other examples of people trying to kind of bring this aesthetic and sound back, but you know, I hadn't seen them. So they were kind of the next big one. For whatever reason, it just clicks with a certain type of person. And ever since then, there's been this whole genre of bands who essentially just keep doing that. High on Fire is another one. It's Matt Pike from Sleep's other band. I like this better than Sleep because it's a little bit more up-tempo. But still, the problem is like a real lack of dynamics and no hooks. We'll talk about this in a minute. As far as I'm concerned, like this is as good as the genre gets, and it's still not that interesting to me. I mean, it's okay, but it kind of doesn't really do that much for me for reasons I'll talk about. And then there's this whole genre of other bands that basically continue to do the same thing. Red Fang, this is another, I guess, big, you know, stoner rock band. Big, at least as big as that genre can be. Pretty much sounds like High on Fire, right? Obviously, all heavy music comes from Sabbath, but it's a little bit too much to try to come so close to those first few Sabbath albums. It still feels like none of the bands take into account how amazing their songwriting is. They just focus on guitar tones, not the songs. Exactly what I think, and I'll explain in more detail in a minute. I mean, sounds very, very similar to Sleep, right? A little bit more up-tempo, but very similar. And this is right. This is my complaint. These people literally make their entire shtick built around fuzz pedals and smoking weed. That's pretty much how I feel about it. You know, there's this whole wave of new bands. This is one that people tell me is good. This band Lowrider, apparently from Sweden, is like a newer band that people tell me is good. This is fine to me. But, I mean, I've heard this hundreds of times over the past 30 years, right? With that out of the way, a little bit of a brief overview of the genre. Again, I'm not by any means an expert on this stuff, and I'm not pretending to be. I'm only giving you my personal opinion on this because people have asked. If you like stoner rock, like, I'm not telling you to stop liking it. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just giving you my opinion on it. The reason why it kind of doesn't work for me is basically what some of the people in the chat have said before. I mean, on the one hand, like, you could say this stuff all sounds the same, and that's true, but I think that's kind of true of almost all genres, right? I mean, that's kind of like the definition of a genre is that it sounds like the stuff in the other genre and it has the same kind of aesthetics as the other stuff in the genre. So I don't think that that's really a unique criticism that you can make of stoner rock because all stuff in all genres sounds the same. But the specific issues that I have with this stuff are really kind of that there's a lack of songwriting. It's riff salad in the same way as like technical death metal is riff salad, only all the technical death metal riffs go right? Stoner rock, all the riffs are like it's kind of all sort of variations on the same thing without really any of the things that I look for in a song, like vocal hooks and dynamics. A lot of these stoner rock bands tend to either be like super slow and droney like all the time, just kind of like maybe that would be stoner doom. I don't know, whatever the difference is, but they either tend to be like really slow and droney and sludgy like early Sleep was, which was cool when Sleep did it. But again, that was 30 years ago. Do we need to do that again and again and again? Or they do sort of the perpetual like mid-tempo thing like this. Like this song is just the same kind of mid-tempo feel the entire time. And if you like it, again, that's cool. But for me, Like, I listen to things with, I guess you could say, more of like a pop ear. I want to hear dynamics. I want to hear variation in the arrangement. I want to hear vocal hooks and lyrics that are catchy to me. You know, the vocal melodies are not really that important in this genre. The lyrics are not really that important in the genre. Like, it's really about the riffs. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're into. But for me, it's got to be more than just a collection of these sort of, you know, recycled Sabbath riffs for me to get into it, you know? And I think part of that is like, maybe if you're really high, this stuff probably sounds amazing. I can imagine that. Like, if I was high as shit, I could imagine that Sleep would be like the most amazing thing ever. Because, you know, weed does funny things to your brain. Weed makes you believe that a lot of things are more amazing than they actually are. So that's sort of my issue with it on a musical level. And on a thematic level, obviously this is called stoner doom for a reason. I'm sure there's some people involved with this scene that don't smoke weed, but it's like kind of an integral part of the culture is like weed and alcohol. It's like basically like lightweight drug addict music, I guess you could call it. Stoner fans like the 3Bs, bongs, beer bongs, and bad music. I think that's probably about right. For me personally, you know, I'm just not into this sort of thing where people make consumption of any drug into their identity or their whole personality, whether that is weed or alcohol or, you know, Xans or whatever. Like, it's not that interesting to me. Like, I'm not offended by it. I don't think it's interesting. You know what I mean? I've been around drug addicts and shit my whole life. I've done plenty of drugs. I get it. If the most interesting thing you have to offer is that you play Black Sabbath riffs, you have a beard, and you smoke a lot of weed, that's just not that interesting to me. You know, aside from that, I feel like there's just a part of it that's just kind of a bummer, in a sad, depressing way, meaning that it's a gateway to bands like I Hate God. Jesus, that's a gateway no one needs to go through. I mean, I agree with you, but nobody needs to go through that gate. If you identify with I Hate God, I'm not being like over the top or sarcastic here. You should get therapy, because that is some like seriously dark shit. I kind of agree with this being sort of the precursor to I Hate God, and that's not a good thing. That's the reason why I don't really resonate with this stuff on a thematic level, because I feel like a lot of this, you know, again, with drugs and alcohol being such a huge part of it, it's just kind of a bummer to me. You know, it's not as depressing as I Hate God, but it's just kind of a bummer. A lot of it feels like just old guys who just sort of gave up. You know what I mean? You could say the same thing about emo rap as far as it being like negative and revolving around drugs. And I think that would be true, you know, because so many of those songs are basically saying like, I'm depressed and I use drugs to cope. And that is a sad message. That's a sad negative message that I don't endorse. But these people are young. You know, these are like 17 to 20-year-old kids or whatever. You feel like there's still a chance for them to change and pull out of it. Whereas like with the stoner stuff, a lot of these people are in their like 30s, 40s, even their 50s. It feels like they're just kind of set in their ways, like they've given up, and they're just kind of going to lean into this lifestyle of smoking weed, drinking beer, and playing Black Sabbath riffs forever. And it bums me out. Again, no judgment. If that's what you're into, you know, you do you. It's your life, not mine. But it doesn't work for me. Like, I do not resonate with that message. Let's just put it that way. So, you know, those are my thoughts on stoner rock, stoner doom, whatever, all that kind of shit. Same thing about, I feel the same way about doom, I guess to a lesser extent, because doom at least doesn't have the stoner element. But, you know, I don't want people to take this as me like shitting on a genre of music. It's just my personal opinion because people have asked, so I wanted to put it out there. The musical innovation isn't there. I don't think the level of craft is super high. I mean, this video is sort of an example of this. I feel like people geek out more about their collection of fuzz pedals than they do, you know, writing songs. And that's disappointing to me. And then on a kind of more thematic or lyrical level as well, just kind of bums me out / grosses me out / bores me. You know, I don't think weed is that interesting. Having your entire life revolve around weed and fuzz pedals is just not, you know, Just not my speed. Let's put it that way. So for anybody who was asked what I thought about Stoner Rock, there's your answer. I'm sorry for anybody who may not like that opinion, but it is just my opinion. At least they ain't on the lean and the fent. Man, I bet a lot of these people do end up getting into fentanyl is the thing. And, you know, alcohol, is alcohol better than fentanyl? I guess, but only marginally, to be honest. Alcohol is a pretty fucking horrible drug. It's one of the worst, in my opinion. I mean, think about how many lives have been ruined by alcohol, you know? It's no joke. Yeah, the soundtrack should be a sad old fat guy. I didn't want to be rude, but yes, basically that. So those are my thoughts on Stoner Rock. Apologies to anybody who didn't want to hear it, but there it is. Don't tell Mom!